1 in 5 women in the U.S. experienced a mental health condition in the past year. I mean, you know me, I talk openly about my own therapy. And here's the deal. Men and women can develop many of the same mental disorders and conditions, but they experience the symptoms differently. And here with more on that is Dr. Stephanie Harper, a psychiatrist with Virginia Mason Franciscan Health. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
So let's start with some of the unique aspects of a woman's mental health. What are some of the gender-specific factors?
Yeah, so stepping back just to start with is just from a historical lens, it's important to remember literally in the mental health world, diagnoses included things like hystericism. So women being, right, exactly. So I think that does trickle down still to where sometimes women's mental health is regarded as being weak-willed, is regarded as exaggerated, and you can miss treatable biological conditions in that respect. Another way of thinking about women's mental health is just in terms of diagnoses and statistics. So women are more likely to be diagnosed with clinical depression, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorders, certainly eating disorders, and of course, women are more likely to experience things like sexual assault, domestic violence. And when they do experience a kind of trauma, women are more likely to actually develop clinical post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah. So we're just really kind of in an area where we're going to see maybe the impact of more hormonal changes too. I remember when I was pregnant, I actually sought care for that.
Yeah, so abrupt hormonal changes cause very significant changes in one's mental health, especially if there's a predisposition there. So oftentimes mental health conditions will most obviously present during adolescence, of course, when people are entering puberty. In the reproductive years, women can experience PMDDs, so premenstrual dysphoric disorder, often feeling highly anxious, feeling out of control, or completely maybe just sad for about a week once a month. And then there is pregnancy and menopause as well. So,
and we don't have. I mean, there's help for all this.
There is help for all of this.
And that's the thing that I don't think we realize. I think sometimes we just accept our lot in life and go, oh, I just have PMDD. I'm just very emotional. Around this time of year, and that's not the case. So, what are some signs and symptoms that women should be aware of? You know, maybe even if they've been kind of thrown in the back of their head for a while.
Yeah. So one thing to remember with, say, depression, and this is really important, is a lot of people think that clinical depression is a matter of being upset, of being sad, maybe having suicidal thoughts. And I would say a lot more often, depression actually presents as a lack of joy, struggling to feel a full spectrum of emotions, struggling to care about things you used to care about, or struggling with just an overall sense of mental and emotional energy. As far as anxiety disorders, you know, life stress is, you're going to react with anxiety, but if it starts to go beyond that, where you're constantly thinking about what ifs, worst case scenarios, and it's taking over your life, that might indicate there's actually some biology to it as well. So.
Well, I think I try to explain to people too, anyone who's ever been through a clinical depression, it's just that hopelessness. That lack of hope. For anything.
And depression can really distort the way we think about life and even the way we think about ourselves. And so in our normal kind of state of being, we might be able to rationally see the situation in a certain way, but when someone becomes clinically depressed, it really distorts things and makes things hard to see a way out of.
Somebody's out there right now and they're hearing this and they're in that space and they're starting to get wound up or keyed up on this. What are something we can give someone right now, some self-care strategies to improve mental health overall?
Yeah, so I actually think that self-care starts with setting boundaries. And we'll get to things like yoga and meditation in a second, but until you start setting boundaries with what people are asking of you, setting boundaries, say, with work-life balance, you're not going to have room to recharge, you're not going to have room for yourself, and therefore you're not going to have room for other people anyway.
No is a complete sentence.
Complete sentence.
Remember that. Okay, now let's talk about yoga.
So self-care activities, now this is assuming someone's not in such a low kind of state of depression where it's a struggle to even get out of bed, right? It's important to be really realistic about your schedule, about your amount of energy, and not be setting goals to where you're going to run a mile every day. If you are to the point where you are struggling to do much at all, maybe you set the goal as low as literally putting your running shoes on for 2 weeks and then stepping it up to where you're walking a block
That's
every 2
amazing.
weeks and so on. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Before I let you go, we only have a little bit of time left. Let's talk about reducing the stigma. How do we do that?
Yeah. Stigma reduction really starts with talking about one's own experience. I'm glad that you talk about yours.
Yeah.
Any mental health campaign, it can say things in broad strokes, but if you hear it from a friend, if you hear it from a family member, it is much more likely that you yourself are going to start thinking, is there room for my mental health here, right? I want to add one thing before we close out. I really briefly mentioned pregnancy and menopause as issues for women's mental health.
Yeah.
And the number one population I wish that I saw more are women who are thinking about getting pregnant, who are pregnant and maybe struggling, or who are postpartum and wondering if something is wrong.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. It has
Yeah.
been a pleasure. Listen to what she says. If you're postpartum, you're not alone.
Yeah.
And to learn more about mental health treatment at Virginia Mason Franciscan Health, visit the website on your screen, vmfh.org/behavioral health. Go find out.
This special presentation of New Day Northwest, sponsored by Virginia Mason Franciscan Health.